People think I married my stepbrother because we were damaged. The truth is worse. We did it to force our parents to admit how they built their marriage. My name is Grace Wilson, and this happened in Seattle, Washington. When I was 16, my mom, Emma Wilson, was dying of cancer. She was a registered nurse at a hospital in Seattle for 22 years. Strong, practical, the kind of woman who labeled leftovers with dates and reminded you to rotate your tires. While she was doing chemo, my dad, Mark Wilson, was having an affair. Not some dramatic hotel room scandal. It was quieter than that. Coffee meetings. Work dinners. Long phone calls he took outside. The woman was Claire Lewis, a project manager he met through a local development contract. She was married once. Divorced. One son. Daniel Lewis. I didn't find out until after my mom's funeral. 2 months. That's how long my dad waited before telling me he was seeing someone. He said it like it was a brave confession. I didn't plan this, Grace, he told me at our kitchen table. It just happened. Your mom would want me to move forward. I remember staring at the wood grain on the table because if I looked at him, I was going to say something unforgivable. 6 months later, Claire moved into our house in a suburb outside Seattle. Beige siding. Quiet street. Hydrangeas out front. Like nothing messy could exist there. Daniel came with her. He was 18. Tall. Quiet. Sharp jaw. He looked at my dad like he was evaluating a product he didn't trust. We didn't speak much at first. I thought his mom was a snake. He thought my dad was a coward. That was enough tension to keep the house tight. But proximity does something to people. You end up in the kitchen at midnight grabbing water. You hear someone else sigh the same way you do. You realize the only other person in the house who didn't choose the situation is standing 3 feet away. One night he said, "My mom told me this started after your mom got sick." I said, "That's a lie." He nodded once. Yeah, I figured. That was the beginning. Over the next few years, our parents rebuilt themselves publicly. Church every Sunday. Social media tributes. Anniversary captions about finding love through loss. My dad, a sales manager, loved an audience. Claire loved structure. Together they built a version of events that erased timelines. They said things like, "We supported each other through grief. We didn't mean for it to happen. God brought us together." What they never said was when it started. At home, control crept in slowly. My dad paid my tuition. That came with conditions. "You're majoring in something practical," he said. "Marketing analytics. Stable." Claire would smile and add, "Your father just wants what's best." Daniel got the same treatment. His mom told him business was non-negotiable. When he pushed back, she reminded him who was paying. Money wasn't help. It was leverage. We weren't allowed to question their story. Once, at dinner, I mentioned my mom and the timeline overlapping. Claire put her fork down and said, "Grace, it's unhealthy to live in resentment." Daniel looked at me across the table. That look said everything. They didn't want healing. They wanted compliance. Daniel and I got close in a way that doesn't have a clean label. Late-night conversations turned into inside jokes. Shared eye contact across the dinner table when our parents contradicted themselves. A silent alliance. People noticed. At a 4th of July barbecue, Claire laughed and said, "You two are practically twins." Daniel replied calmly, "We're not related." It made her uncomfortable. I saw it. That's when the idea was born. Not fully formed. Just a spark. A few weeks later, we were sitting on the back steps. It was late. The house was dark. Daniel said, almost casually, "What would they do if we dated?" I let out a short laugh. "They'd lose their minds." He didn't laugh. "We're adults," he said. "We're not related. There's nothing technically wrong with it." He wasn't talking about romance. He was talking about pressure. And I understood immediately. Because the one thing our parents feared wasn't morality. It was embarrassment. We didn't jump into it. We talked for months. About optics. About fallout. About whether we were crossing some invisible line. There was chemistry. I won't pretend there wasn't. When two people survive the same emotional storm in the same house, something binds you. But what tied us tighter than attraction was anger. They built their marriage on a story they edited. What would happen if we introduced a plot twist they couldn't spin? The first move was small. A brewery on the Seattle waterfront. Casual. Dim lighting. I posted one photo. Daniel sitting close. My hand resting on his arm. No caption. The comments came fast. "Wait, isn't that your stepbrother?" My phone rang 10 minutes later. My dad. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Having a drink," I said. "You know how that looks." There it was. Not wrong. Not immoral. How that looks. I said, "Why does it matter?" Silence. Then, "This is inappropriate." I asked, "Is it illegal?" He didn't answer. From there, we leaned in. Not theatrically. Strategically. At Thanksgiving, Daniel sat beside me instead of at the end of the table. When Aunt Sarah made a joke about us being attached at the hip, we didn't correct her. Claire's smile tightened. My dad watched us like we were a problem he hadn't calculated. Then came the family meeting. Living room. Sunday afternoon. Blinds half closed like it was an intervention. "This is twisted," my dad said. Daniel replied evenly, "How?" "Your siblings." "We're not." Claire's voice cracked. People are talking. Daniel looked at her and said quietly, "Were they talking when you were sleeping with a married man?" Dead silence. It was the first time anyone said it out loud. My dad stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You don't get to judge us." Daniel's jaw tightened. "We're just existing. If that's embarrassing, that's not on us." They threatened to cut us off financially. What they didn't know is we had already prepared. I had taken student loans quietly the semester before. Daniel had secured a job as a financial advisor downtown. Leverage only works if someone needs you. We were done needing them. The engagement wasn't impulsive. It was calculated. My dad had recently merged significant assets with Claire. Property, investments, retirement accounts. If Daniel and I married, it complicated beneficiary structures. We consulted professionals independently. Quietly. Nothing illegal. Just inconvenient. When we announced the engagement at a small dinner in Seattle, Claire's hand trembled around her wine glass. My dad didn't yell. He just stared at us like we detonated something invisible. Within a month, he was restructuring assets, meeting with advisors, separating premarital holdings, protecting himself. He was scared. Not of sin. Of exposure. Because if he condemned us publicly, people would ask why it bothered him so much. And then they'd ask about timelines. 3 weeks before the wedding, my dad called me into his office. He looked older. "I won't be manipulated," he said. I smiled slightly. "Neither will I." The trust was rewritten. Assets separated. Control diluted. That was the goal. We called off the wedding a week later. Publicly, we said we realized it would create division. Privately, Daniel and I sat in his apartment in downtown Seattle and understood something had shifted permanently. We didn't need to marry. We had already forced them to blink. Daniel moved to Chicago the following year for a better position. We didn't implode. We didn't confess some grand love story. We just untangled. What we had was real. But it was also born in resistance. Sometimes I wonder if we crossed a line that didn't need to be crossed. Sometimes I think we just held up a mirror. Now my dad and Claire are quieter. Less performative. Less preachy. They don't talk about destiny anymore. They don't threaten. They don't rewrite history in front of me. They learned something. Or maybe they just got tired. And here's the part one don't say out loud. If Daniel called tomorrow and said, "Let's actually do it." No strategy. No revenge. I don't know what I'd say. Because somewhere between the plan and the fallout, it stopped being just a weapon. It became something complicated. So, did we take it too far? Or did we finally make them feel what it's like when the narrative isn't yours anymore?